Masechet Yevamot Daf Sadi Bet. We start with the statement Amar Rav Asher ul Kala la Haishinan. We do not worry about rumors. We're talking about a case of a woman who was married and the husband goes away, and then she has some evidence that he died, and she gets remarried to a second man. If there's a rumor that the husband is alive, but no more than a rumor, then we do not have to worry about it. She can remain married to her second husband, and she can ignore the rumor. It's not substantiated. Okay, good. So hekala. Now we ask, what kind of rumor? When did this happen? See, the rumor could happen before she gets married or after she gets married. If the rumor is before she got married, in other words, there was some evidence, two witnesses or one witness, that said your husband is dead. And so she didn't get married yet. If there's a rumor in the meantime, well, then she really should check out the rumor before she gets married. All right, that's a problem. A rumor before the wedding. But a rumor after the wedding, well, it's already done. What are you going to now prohibit something that's already done based on something unsubstantiated? So in that case, we would not worry about the rumor. So now we ask, if it's talking about after the wedding, ha'amara Rav Asher hadazimna. Rav Asher already said that one time. Why would you say it twice? Damar Rav Asher, kol kala debata nisuin lo chashina. And any rumor that's after the wedding, we don't worry about. Why did he say again, we don't worry about rumors? And the answer is, and the answer is not to say that a rumor before the wedding would be okay. That we would take seriously, and we would want to wait and clarify. Rather, he said it twice to include our case, because I might have thought in a case like ours where there's one witness only, and she has to go to Bet Din to say, hey, can I rely on this witness? And they do an investigation. I might have thought that since she had to come to Bet Din in the first place, even though they permitted it, still, that is like a rumor that is before the marriage. And therefore, I might have thought that it should be prohibited. And therefore, he says it again to teach me that it's permitted. In other words, sometimes when you say, this person was investigated for misconduct, for fraud, even if the court said that they were not guilty, still, why they have to be investigated in the first place, right? Is there something going on here? And therefore that, plus a rumor that comes after the wedding, I might have thought those two things joined together, and then, this rumor after the wedding substantiates the investigation that we had to do before the wedding, and maybe I would say, she has to leave her second husband. And therefore Rav Asher says, no, you do not have to. Rumors are just rumors. Next, Niset al pi betin teseh. The end of the Mishnah said that if the woman is relying on Bet Din said, you can go get married. We based on one witness. We believe your husband is dead. We believe the witness. And she does and gets married, and then the husband comes back. She does not have to bring a korban because she relied on the court. And that's the general rule of Horayot. When a Bet Din makes a ruling and it's mistaken, and let's say it's for the public and many people follow it, in that case the Bet Din has to bring a special korban for their error, and the individuals do not have to bring a korban chatat. And here too, because she relied on the court, she does not have to bring korban chatat. She does get all the other penalties and consequences and lots of terrible things, but at least she saves a few $100s on bringing in animal sacrifice. That's what the Mishnah said. Amar ze'iri leta lematnitin medetane bemidrasha. Detane bemidrasha horu betin sheshaka hama ulbasov zarcha en zohora'a ela ta'ud. Ziri says, we reject our Mishnah. We do not accept this Mishnah, because we have a Baraita that we learned in the Bet Midrash, and we're going to prefer that one. Interesting why we prefer this Bet Midrash. I guess they discussed it, and they decided that this is preferable over the Mishnah. This Baraita says that if a Bet Din makes a ruling that the sun has set, and they said Shabbat is over, and in the end, they go outside and they look, it's the sun is still out. Maybe there was a very dark cloud and it looked like it was dark, and the Bet Din erred. then we do not call that a hora'ah. This is not a valid ruling that people could rely on and say, oh, the Bet Din told me to. I don't have to bring korban. The Bet Din brings a korban. No, this is just called a ta'ut. This is simply a mistake. What's the difference between a wrong ruling and a complete mistake? The difference is that this has to do with a mistake in fact. Did the sun set or did it not set? If the court makes a mistake in fact, then they are not responsible for that. The people who sinned, although everybody was unwitting, right? All of this is talking about people that are not doing it on purpose. You only bring a korban chatat if it's not on purpose. But the liability for the korban in the case of a mistake of fact relies on the people. They could have, the court doesn't have any more special expertise in clouds and realia than the people, so anyone could check it out. Whereas if it's a mistake in law, that they use some reasoning, derivation, source that they got wrong, then a mistake in law is in fact a valid ruling that the court is responsible for. And if it turns out that that ruling was wrong, then the court is responsible and the people who followed it do not have to bring a korban. So that's the point of this Baraita and Bet Midrash. Just like if a court makes a mistake regarding sunset, the people are liable, so too here, the court said, your husband is dead. That's a mistake in law. In fact, in reality. In fact, the husband was alive. So that was a mistake in fact. Therefore, the court is not liable. The woman is liable against the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that the woman is exempt. And this Baraita says the woman is liable. Okay. Rav Nachman Amar Hora'ahi. Rav Nachman backs up the Mishnah. And he says, in fact, it is a mistake in ruling. Why would he say that? Amar Rav Nachman, Teda dehora'ahi, tebechol Torah kula ayed echad lo meheman, v'hacha meheman. After all, in the whole Torah, the Torah requires two witnesses based for almost everything. And in general, one witness is not believed. And yet here, the court says, okay, we will believe one witness. So in fact, they made a mistaken ruling in halacha. The court didn't say, we declare, right, we rule that your husband is dead. They didn't say that. They said, we rule that we can rely on this single witness. Well, that's a ruling. It turns out that ruling was wrong because that witness was not reliable. That witness lied knowingly, maybe made a mistake. He saw someone die, he thought it was him. It doesn't matter. The point is that, according to Rav Nachman, that we're focusing on the ruling, and the court said that we rely on one witness, and that was a mistake, and therefore the woman is not responsible because this is the court that made a mistake in law. Rav Nachman, on the other hand, right, my tamad, la mishum dehorai. So you see, it's a mistake in law. Whereas Rav Nachman said that was Rav Nachman. Whereas Ze'iri and the Baraita here said, no, it's a mistake in fact, because they're focusing on the result. The court said your husband is dead. Well, that didn't turn out to be true. But if a court makes a mistake in fact, then they are not liable to that. The woman is liable. All right, so now that we ended with Rav Nachman, who says a mistake in law, and that supports the Mishnah. Amar Rava, Teda de ta'utu. Rava says, no, I go back to this Baraita, and I disagree with the Mishnah, and I'm going to prove to you that it is in fact a mistake in fact. How do we know? He's going to make a comparison. So watch this. Let's say Betin came and said, this forbidden fat, this section of fat, or this blood is permitted. They know it was blood, but they said blood is permitted. This is a mistake in law. Okay, they made the wrong law. They thought that for some reason this particular section of fat is permitted, and so they made a mistake. Now, in that case, the court would be responsible because it's a mistake in law. Now, and then they checked it again and they realized, oh, that was a mistake, and they found another source, another reason to say, you know what, it's prohibited. What if, okay, good. And now, if for some reason they flip-flop again and they go back to the original position, not based on anything new, they forgot that they updated the record, they forgot that someone already disproved it, and they went back to the first one. we would not be able to rely on it. That would not be a valid ruling. That would simply be a mistake, and we could not rely on it. The court would not be responsible. So that would be a case of a kind of flip-flop in a mistaken law, that originally the court would be responsible, but then they recognize that they are wrong. If they go back to their first error, they are no longer responsible. That's what has to do with law. Now let's compare it to our case. Atu tere asarna ki hadar ata aide ha'ed acharina sharinan le. Maitama la mishum de ta'utu. In a case like ours, where you have one witness comes and says, I saw your husband is dead. So in that case, the court permits her to remarry. Now, if two come and say, oh, no, he was wrong. In fact, your husband is alive. So now she's prohibited. She has to leave that husband. She has to leave both husbands. Okay, if after that, at a later date, one witness comes and says, oh, now your husband is dead. Right, he wasn't dead before, but now he died since then. And now we still believe, we would believe this witness and say, you know what, now you can get remarried. And so you see that we're going back to our original ruling. If we said it's a mistake in ruling, well, then when the first time that they said your husband is dead, there was a mistake in ruling, okay, the court is responsible. When we realize that that whole system is no good, then, and because two witnesses disproved it, then if they go back to the original ruling and once again believe a single witness, right? Let's say the second time she gets married to another guy, but then a witness comes and says he's dead. We still believe him. Well, if it was parallel, if it was a mistaken ruling, it would be parallel to this case, and we would not believe them in the second time that they make the same mistaken ruling to rely on one witness. But in fact, we do believe them. Why? Because it's not a mistaken ruling. They're allowed to rely on one witness. This is the established law. Whether it's Doraita, Dorabanan, doesn't matter. The rabbis established that you can rely on one witness. The mistake here is not a mistake in law. We would apply the law again and again. Rather, it's a mistake in fact. Right? We followed the right procedure, but it turned out, in fact, he was alive. And therefore, you see that this is a mistake in fact and not in law. If it was a mistake in law, we parallel to this case. It's not parallel to this case where it's a mistake in ruling. Therefore, it's a mistake in fact. There you go. Okay, also must think that this is a mistake in reality, in fact. And so even he would go against the Mishnah. So we have extra support besides the Baraita. Also this second Baraita, that Tanir Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Eliezer says, let the law pierce the mountain, and the woman has to bring a big fat animal, korban hatat. This phrase, let the law pierce the mountain, is a way of saying apply strict justice and don't take into account mercy or any other considerations, even though here you might think to take into consideration the fact that she didn't do anything wrong, and now her life is going to be very difficult. She has to leave both husbands, all kinds of penalties. Says no, nevertheless, this is the way it is, and she also has to bring a korban, a fat one, for really doing something wrong. Okay, now why did he say this? If the court's ruling was a mistake in fact, then that's why she has to bring a korban, right? Because that makes sense, because a mistake in fact is not their responsibility. But if it's a mistake in ruling, and the mistake in law, then why would she have to bring korban? Then the court is responsible for that. Okay, so that's a good point. Now, hold on, maybe Rabbi Eliezer disagrees with the whole basic law of harayot, and he thinks that even an individual who follows a mistaken ruling of a bet din, the individual is liable. Maybe that's what he thinks, and that's why. No, imken ma'ikov hadin tahar. In that case, why would he have to say, "Oh, let there be strict justice. The law pierce the mountain"? And by saying that, he's recognizing that in general, yes, the bet din would be responsible for mistakes in mistakes in law. But here, no, we can't blame it on Bet Din, even though they declared that she can go get remarried. No, here we consider it a mistake in fact, because the husband in fact was alive, and they said we think he's dead. But that's a mistake in fact, and so we say, too bad, strict justice. Sorry. You have to bring a big fat korban, and so we have a couple of baraitot against the Mishnah, and a very interesting discussion about what do you focus on, the mistake of law or the mistaken outcome of whether the husband is dead or not. All right, next we say, if the Bet Din decided that she can get remarried, and she goes and remarries a proper guy with good kiddushin, someone that she's allowed to marry, then good. Then she doesn't have to bring korban, according to the Mishnah. But if she messes up, right? If she is kilkela, if she does something wrong, has some kind of wrong intercourse, then she is liable. And that permission that the Bet Din said to go remarry is rescinded because she misused it. Okay, so my kilkela, we ask, what does it mean? What does she have to do wrong to be a kilkela? If she goes and has relations with someone out of marriage, that licentious relations, this is kilkela. We said you can go get properly married. This is not proper activity, and therefore, in that case, that would be considered adultery. And we don't say, oh, now that your husband was dead, we say we take that back. And we only gave you a special leniency because we thought you wanted to remarry. But now you don't deserve that leniency. Like, if my son wants special permission to stay up late to finish a project for school, okay, fine. And then he goes and uses it to play video games. No, I didn't give it. So now he gets punished for staying up late. He says, why? But you gave me permission to stay up late. Yeah, only for one reason, not for the other reason. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan amar almana lekohen gadol kedusha v'chalutza lekohen hedyot. Rabbi Yochanan is more mekel. He says if she only went and had extramarital relations, that does not violate a specific prohibition. So she still be okay. Whereas if she is an almanah, she marries a kohen gadol. If she's a divorcee or a chalutza, and she marries a kohen, regular kohen, now she entered into a marriage that is prohibited, and that is called misusing the permission of the Bet Din, and then the Bet Din's permission is gone. Okay, Mandamar zineta. Rabbi Eliezer says zineta kol sheken almana lekohen gadol. All the more so if just extramarital affair. She used the Bet Din said that she's single, right? So she goes and does that. So there's no specific violation. If even that is called kilkela, then all the more so a specific prohibition against a kohen marriage. Rabbi Eliezer would agree with Rabbi Yochanan. But Rabbi Yochanan would not agree with Rabbi Eliezer. It's only if you violate a serious lav prohibition, and not if she is just promiscuous. The reason is because she can say, you're the ones that said I am single. So you said I'm single and I can go get remarried. Okay, I'm using your permission to go and have promiscuous relations with someone who's not married. So I'm not married, he's not married, and this is not a good thing to do, and the Bet Din wouldn't want it, but she is, after all, single. So she can use that, but not to go and make a serious violation. Tanya Kivated Rabbi Yochanan, we have a baraita that supports the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan that only if it's if she violates a lav, where it says Horuha Bet Din lehinaseh. Bet Din said, go get married, and she goes and messes up. For example, right, these two examples of a lav, a kohen marrying kohen gadol marrying amana, or a regular kohen marrying a gerusha or a chalutza. Hayevet bekorban al chol bi'ab ubi'ad Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar says not to be confused with Rabbi Eliezer. He disagrees. He's the one that's more machmir. This Rabbi Elazar is precedent for Rabbi Yochanan, and he says he's adding something else besides. Not only is she liable, right? She's only exempt from a korban if she went and got remarried, even if it turns out that the husband was alive and comes back, so she gets the penalties, but she doesn't have to bring korban because her being with the second man, that was based on betin. But if it's a kohen gadol, or if it's kohen to a gerusha, then she has to bring a korban, and now his chidush is not only one korban, a korban in every single bi'ah that they have. The Chachamim omerim korban echad ala koachim. No, so one korban on the marriage, not on every single bi'ah. So it's more lenient, but they're still within Rabbi Yochanan. Modim Chachamim Rabbi Elazar shim niseta chamisha bnei adam shechayevet bekorban al kol echad ve'echad hoil v'gufin mechulakin. However, the sages do agree that you could bring more than one korban if she got married to 5 different men in succession that she was prohibited to. And that in that case, she would have to bring a korban for each and every one, since they are separate people. So you don't have to bring, they don't have to bring on every single bi'ah with the same person. So the same person, all one korban, but more than one person, each one requires a separate korban. But this whole baraita, even despite this machloket, assumes that it's only if it's a prohibited marriage, prohibited by a lav, then that's called kilkela, and she has to bring a korban. But if she only had promiscuous relations, not with someone that she didn't marry, although that's not a good thing, nevertheless, that she could still rely on the betin, and even when the husband comes back, she does not have to bring her own separate korban hatat. We begin the next Mishnah. Ha'isha shehalach ba'ala ubna lemedinat hayam uba'u v'amru la met ba'alech v'achar kach met benech. So more combinations of similar cases of people going away. In this case, we're going to include a yibum aspect of it. So a woman you have a woman whose husband and their son, his son, goes, it says her son, but actually have to be his son, goes away to a different country. And then she hears, Uba'u Amrullah, some witnesses come and say, oh, listen, your husband died first, and then your son died. Let's assume they have no other children. He has no other son, no other children. So because the father died first, so the father died with child. Therefore, there's no need to do yibum, even though afterwards the son died, and so ends up that he has no living children, but that only happened after he died. So we focus on the time that he died, he had children, no need for yibum or chalitza, and so she appropriately, and he said, she goes and remarries a second guy. And then the witnesses come and say, or new witnesses come and say, oh, actually, it was the opposite. I'm sorry, we got the order wrong. Actually, your son died first, and then the husband died, which means, since the son died first, at the time that the husband died, he died without children. And therefore, she was required to do yibum. She was not allowed to go and marry this second husband. Therefore, she has to leave him. And the children that she has with the second husband, the first and the last, which means both those that she had before the second set of witnesses came and those she had after the second set of witnesses came. For sure, those, because then she already knew, so she was purposefully in this illicit relationship, and even the ones before, when it was not, when she did not know, she thought she was doing something good. Nevertheless, even those unwitting, still the children are mamzerim. Okay, a few things to clarify here. Number one, what do you mean the children are mamzerim? What kind of prohibition is this? She has a zikah with the yavam. She was supposed to be with the yavam, and she goes and marries someone else, shomeret yavam, who goes and marries someone else before doing yibum or chalitza. That is only in isur lav, which means that the children should not be mamzer, except for the Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is the one that says that even for an isur lav, the children are mamzer, and that's what the Gemara will discuss. That must be a case like that. The other point that the Gemara will ask about this is, why do you have to say the children from the first and the first children and the second children are mamzerim? What difference does it make before or after the second set of witnesses come? Still the same prohibition. Okay, Gemara will answer that's just because of parallelism. It doesn't really make a difference. Then that's why it says it as style. Okay, Amrullah, second case. Met benech v'achar kach met balech. At first, the witnesses came and said, your son died first, and then your husband died, which means that at the time he died, he did not have a child. So he died without children. She has to do yibum or chalitza. So she does. Nitya bema v'achar kach amrullah chiluf hayu hadevarim teseh v'avalad rishon v'acharon mamzer. She does yibum, but then they say actually it was the other way around. The child was alive when the husband died, and therefore this yibum that you did was prohibited. This is a more serious case because if she has relations with her brother-in-law, in which yibum is required, that's a mitzvah. But if they have relations when yibum is not required, and since he had a child when he died, it was not required, that is incest, that is erva, and therefore she has to leave the yavam, that's for sure, and the children that are born either before the second set of witnesses come or or after are both mamzerim. And in this case, it will be mamzerim according to everybody, because this is in isur of arayot, of a woman being with her brother-in-law. Okay, next case. Amrullah met ba'alich v'niset. Someone said your husband died. She gets married. V'achar kach amrullah kayam haya v'met. And then they said, actually, at the time that you got married, he was alive. He has died since. Teseh v'havalad rishon mamzer v'acharon eno mamzer. In this case, she has to leave. Because at the time when the husband was alive, this was a prohibited relationship. This was adulterous, so she can't remain married to him. However, only the children she had while before the husband died are mamzerim. While the husband was alive, those kids are mamzerim. But any children that she had after his death, right? The witnesses, we presume, say, listen, he died, 5 years ago. And she had some children before and some children after. The ones afterwards, since the husband was dead, so they are not mamzerim because she was single at the time. All right, and so in this case it says there is a difference between before and after. That's why for parallelism it says in the other cases also. The next case, Amrullah met ba'alich v'nit kadesha. They said your husband died, but she only did kiddushin. She didn't get a chance to do nisuin yet, to finish off the full marriage. Ve'achar kach ba ba'ala muteret lachzor lo. And then the husband came back. In that case, she can return to original husband because all she did was accept a ring from some other guy. And so that's ring is nothing. She didn't violate any prohibition. And not only that, the second guy does not even have to give a get. Usually, if you want to break off a kiddushin, you need a get. In this case, because she was in fact married that whole time, their husband was alive, a woman who was married cannot affect kiddushin with another man, and therefore there's no need for a get. And even if he gives a get, we don't even say there's a reyach a get. There are many cases where you don't technically need a get midoraita, but the rabbis say, you know what, give a get because it's confusing, whatever reason. So anytime there's any requirement of get at any level, the woman becomes prohibited to marry a kohen. However, if a random man just gives a random woman a get for no reason, is not necessary, then she could still marry a kohen. And so this would be the same, even though they did kiddushin, but the kiddushin was not valid, and therefore he does not require to give a get. Even if he gives a get, it's not even a hint of a get that was given, and she can marry a kohen. How do we know that? Because it says a kohen cannot marry a woman who is divorced from her husband. Only if she's divorced from her husband, right? But not from someone who is not her husband. And so if they didn't do nisuin yet, they are not fully married. And therefore, since it was only kiddushin, And so they were never, not only that, right, not only fully any married at all, because they were not married at all, since the husband was alive, this kiddushin was nothing. Therefore, only someone who was divorced from someone she was invalidly married to in some kiddushin or nisuin. But here, there was not kiddushin, not nisuin, not anything. So the get is 0. She can marry a kohen. All right, good. Now we ask about the first case. Mai rishon umai acharon. What does it mean that the children are mamzerim both from the first and the second? If the first is before she heard that the first report was wrong, and v'acharon is after the second set of witnesses come, then litnei havalad mamzer. Just say the child is a mamzer. All children are mamzerim. You don't even have to make a distinction between before and after. And the answer is bishum dekaba'e lemitnei sefa amru la bet balich v'niset v'achar kach amru la kayam haya. Vamet harishon mamzer v'acharon eno mamzer. Because in the third case of the Mishnah, where they said that your husband is dead, and then she got remarried, and then they said actually he was alive, but he died subsequently, the children that are born before he died are mamzerim, but the children that are born afterwards are not. Because there is a distinction there, we want to keep the form of every case in the Mishnah parallel to each other, and that way you notice the subtle differences between each case. So therefore, Tana Medresha Rishon v'Acharon mamzer. That's why in the first case it says the first and last are mamzerim, even though there's no difference there. Tenora banan zo dibre Rabbi Akiva shaya omer en kiddushin tofsin bechayave lavin. Okay, so good. The first case where she was in fact a shomeret yavam. She went and got remarried thinking that her husband died while the child was alive, so she didn't need yibum chalitza. Turns out, actually, the child had died first, and so she needed to do yibum chalitza. She was a shomeret yavam this whole time, and therefore prohibited to the second guy. But that prohibition is only in Isur Lav, and yet the children are mamzerim. So why? It must be Zo divrei Rabbi Akiva sheomer en kiddushin tofsin bechayave lavin. It must be that this is the words of Rabbi Akiva. He says that if someone tries to do kiddushin with someone who is prohibited as a lav, the kiddushin does not take effect. Corollary of that is the children are mamzerim. Those two things generally go together. So that's why is it Rabbi Akiva who says children from Isur Lav are mamzerim. That's the case. But the sages say that there some a shomeret yavam, a woman who is a yevama, before she does yibum and chalitza, if she goes and has a child with another man, it does not produce a mamzer. So it must be that our Mishnah is like Rabbi Akiva, not like Chachamim. Now we ask a question on this Braita. Velema en mamzer mechayave lavin. Why does this Braita say there's no mamzer from a yevama who marries a third person, a non-related person? Why doesn't it say the more general rule that Chachamim think, that there is no mamzer if it's only Isur Lav? That the mamzer is produced from Isur Karet, not Isur Lav. And this is just one example. So why doesn't it say the more general rule? And the answer is, Haytana, Hachtana, de Rabbi Akiva hu damar, Mechayave lavin disher have mamzer. Mechayave lavin gerede lo have mamzer. This must be that this Braita is actually two opinions within Rabbi Akiva. Neither opinion here is the full Chachamim. Chachamim say more lenient across the board. There's no mamzer for any Isur Lav. But within Rabbi Akiva, there is a machloket that one Tana of Rabbi Akiva, the first one says there's no kiddushin for any chayve lavin. But the other one says, wait, meaning there's a mamzer for all chayve lavin. But the other says, no, chayve lavin disher. If there's a flesh and blood relation, or even legal, if the two people are related, and an Isur Lav, that produces a mamzer. Example of that would be someone who marries his halutza. Right? He could have done yibum or chalitza. He decides to do chalitza. Great. But now he can't marry the chalutza, and if he does, they are related, because that's brother and sister-in-law. And so if he does, that is a Isur Lav, and they are related. That would produce a mamzer. But mechayave lavin geridi. But if a regular, just a plain old lav, and the example when they're not related is a shomeret yavam who goes and has a child with a third party who's not related to either of them. They are not related, and this is Isur Lav that would not produce a mamzer. So that's within the Rabbi Akiva. There are these two opinions. So this would anyway. Our Mishnah would follow the first opinion here of Rabbi Akiva. Good. Amar Rav Yehuda. Amar Rav, minayin she'en kiddushin tofsin b'Yevamah. Rav says that if someone she's shomeret yavam, she's supposed to do yibum with a guy, and in the meantime she does. Someone comes and does kiddushin with her. He says the kiddushin does not take effect. Shene'emar lo tiyeh eshet hamet achusa leish zar. Even though in general, Isur Lav, only in Isur Lav, according to the majority opinion, the Kiddushin does take effect, but not here, because the Pasuk says, Lo tihiyeh, and tihiyeh is a language of Havaya, to be with, to form a marital relation. So it says that the Yevamah, because she has to go and do yibum or chalitza with her brother-in-law, she cannot be, meaning there's no possibility of her creating a marriage, achutza, with a foreigner, with a foreign man, besides the yavam. So there is no marriage. So therefore, kiddushin does not work. Good, that's Rav's opinion. He's lenient on her. Shmuel Amar be'aniyutenu siricha get. Shmuel says, sorry, we have, in our poverty of knowledge, we're not sure what this pasuk means, and therefore we require a get. It could be that the kiddushin does take effect. Eshet hamet idelav hu da'ata idela tafseh b'kiddushin hu da'ata. Shmuel's not sure when it says lo tihiyeh, do not be. Does that mean do not be? Meaning it's prohibited for her to be with another man. And if she is, and he does kiddushin, it does work. It does work, but it's prohibited. So when this is loti saying don't do this, or is it saying there is no way you can do this? Right? Is that you may not do this, or you cannot do this? So he's not sure, or if it means that it does not work at all, like Rav said. Since he's not sure, he says you better require a get from that husband, that second man. Okay, Amar le Rav Mari bar Rachel le Rav Asher. We have Mari here, who's known by his mother. Not usually we go by the father. Here it must be that she explains a whole other case. There was a whole complicated thing with his father, who converted, so therefore he's known after his mother. Okay, anyway, he said to Rav Asher, Hachi Amar Amemad, reporting in the name of Amemad, Halacha kevatet Shmuel, we are stringent like Shmuel to require that the Yishomeret Yavam, who has with another man, requires a get, because Kiddushin, we suspect, is invalid. So, well, now we can apply this case to where the Yevamah, since he said like Shmuel, if her Yavam, if the Yavam is a Kohen, then there's going to be a problem. So, because he cannot marry a divorcee. So if she goes, she's supposed to do Yibum with this Kohen. Instead, she goes and she has Kiddushin with some other guy. Now, she's not allowed to be with that guy. He has to give her a get. Okay, fine. He gives her a get. But now she's a divorcee, so he can no longer do Yibum. So what do? Yes, he has to do Chalitza. He has to do something to sever the Zikah. Choletzla, Veshad Yaleh. And after he does Chalitza, she can go back to that other man, that husband that she was prohibited to before. Now she's permitted because you did Chalitza. Okay, now we ask about that. Itagure, itgar. Wait, should she gain from something from this? Imken masinu chote niskar. If so, you have someone who sins but benefits from it, right? How could we let her go back to that husband that she was prohibited to be with, and she's actually benefiting from that because she was with that husband, and the Kiddushin works? Or at least, there's a chance, according to Shemuel, that the Kiddushin works, and now she requires a get. Because she requires a get, now she cannot be with her Yavam. He cannot do Yibum because she's a divorcee and he's a Kohen. So that forces him to do Chalitza, and now she benefits because, see, you did Chalitza. Now I'm going to go back to that guy. We should not have any principle where someone gains by making a sin. Ela imaya Yevama Yisrael noten la sheni get vehutra lo. Rather, what he must have what he must have said, what Rav Hashem must have meant is that if the Yavam was a Yisrael, then the other husband, the husband that she married illicitly, will give her a get, and she is then permitted to do yibum with the Yisrael Yavam. And in that case, she has to sever that illicit relation, and she can go back and do yibum with the Yisrael. Okay, next halacha. Amar Rav Gidal, Amar Rav Chiya, Abar Yosef, Amar Rav, in the name of Rav also, like the previous one. Yevama, Kiddushin, and Ba, Nisuin, Yesh Ba. Although Yevama does not have Kiddushin, Kiddushin does not apply, that's what he said above, but there is Nisuin. This is very strange. What do you mean? How could there be nisuin without kiddushin? Right? You can't go 2 miles if you don't give. You can't. There's no way. If you can say you can't go 1 mile, there's no way you can get to 2 miles. You have to pass 1 mile first. You have to pass kiddushin in order to get to nisuin. So we say kiddushin and ba nisuin nami and ba. If there's no kiddushin, there's no way that there could be nisuin. So what does he mean by this? We're gonna have 3 interpretations. Emma. Kiddushin vin nisuin ba. What he meant to say is not only is there no kiddushin, also there's no nisuin. That if they do have bi'ah together, that does not consummate anything. There's no kiddushin. There's no nisuin. Nothing. For her, that would be further application of the lo tihiyeh, right? What's we said here? Lo tihiyeh. They cannot. There's no way for a shemer javam to be with anybody else. Second answer: Vibetem amay nisuin yesh ba biznut kederav hamnuna demarav hamnuna shomeret javam shezineta asura livama. What he meant is in a promiscuous way. If they try to do nisuin, meaning if they consummate something, meaning they're just together, but it's actually just promiscuous relations. If she is a shomeret javam and she has relations with a third party, then what happens is that there is, what he means by there is nisuin is that she becomes prohibited to the yavam. It's like someone in a marriage. If she commits adultery on purpose, she cannot go back to him. So this is the same thing. She cannot go back to. Then she's not actually married to that guy, but it's sufficient to make her prohibited to the yavam. Third answer: No, actually, it's what we said in the beginning. That in fact kiddushin does not work, but nisuin does take effect only midrabanan. So they're not actually married, but it's sufficient that we will require that she get a get. So shomeret yavam, she's supposed to be with the yavam. Instead, she goes and does some nisuin ceremony with some other guy. She's not fully married, but he has to give her a get. Anyway, why? Because we may confuse this case with the classic case of that we started with our Mishnah of woman of the first Mishnah of the Perek, woman who goes, whose husband goes away, and she gets remarried, and then he comes back, and there we say he has to give her a get, because it's confusing. People will say, "What is this?" So she married the second guy. We're all at the wedding, so she can't just leave him. And that case looks similar to this case, where she was supposed to be with Yavam. Instead, she went with another guy, and they're living together. And so, if she just leaves him without a divorce, people will say she doesn't need a divorce. I guess the other case doesn't need a divorce, and therefore we require a get because of the similarity between the cases. All right. Now, Amar Biyanai b'chabura nimnu v'gamru en kiddushin tofsin bivama. So they got together in the group, in the study group, and they voted. And they came to the conclusion that kiddushin does not take effect in the Yevamah, like the opinion of Rav before. Amar le Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi lo mishtatenu hizo. So Rabbi Yochanan says, my master, right, to Rabbi Yanai, isn't this an explicit Mishnah? What do you mean yet you voted and decided, as if it's up to us, these Amoraim, the early Amoraim, great sages, but the Mishnah is more authoritative. So we have a Mishnah already that addresses this. Titnan. Someone he comes to a woman who is not Jewish, and he says, here's a ring, and you, behold, you are sanctified unto me with this ring after you convert. That's nothing. She's not Jewish. You can't you can't do kiddushin with someone not Jewish, and you can't make a condition about it because you're making a condition with someone who's not Jewish. Or if he's not Jewish, he says, after I convert, then this will be the kiddushin, and it'll take effect then. No, you can't. This doesn't work. I mean, you can make conditions. In Kiddushin, you could say, this you are mikudeshet to me on this date, or when I do this. That's fine, as long as they're both Jewish and they were both eligible to marry, to do Kiddushin, then you can put a Tanayin. But here, they're not Jewish. Or, lachar shemut baalech, lachar shetamut achotech. Or it says, you're mikudeshet to me after your husband dies. She can't do kiddushin while her husband is alive because she's married, right? So can you imagine such a case? This is, okay, when your husband dies, I get first dibs, right? And we will be already immediately mikudeshin. She's not eligible. You can't do kiddushin with someone who's not eligible. Or if the man is or was married to one sister and divorced or still married, and he says, after this one sister dies, then I will be married to you. But you can't be married to two sisters when both are alive. And so also here, they are not eligible to be married. So this condition does not work. And here's the key for us. If he goes to a shomedet yavam, and he says, here, you are sanctified unto me with this ring after the yavam does chalitza with you. Also no good. What does this teach us? That a shomeret yavam is not eligible for kiddushin. Not only that's a prohibition, but that it cannot take effect at all. It's like being not Jewish. It's like or being married. Ena mikudeshet. So there you go. It's an explicit Mishnah. Amale ilav did lai la chaspa mimashkach marganita tute. So the Bianai says to him, you're right, it is a Mishnah, but no one ever derived that from the Mishnah before. You never noticed this. If not that I had picked up the shard, or maybe it really should be a shell. If not, I had picked up the shell, you would not have found a pearl, right? The analogy is, right, I pick up a shell, and then you see the pearl. Says, look, I found a pearl. What do you mean you found the pearl? I'm the one that showed you where it is, right? If I loosen the jar of pickles and you come and say, oh, okay, I opened it. You didn't open it. I'm the one that actually loosened it. You did the easy part. Same thing here. Rabbi Yochanan is like, look how smart I am. See, I see that this is in the Mishnah. And I said, you would never have connected this Mishnah with this whole issue, if not that I had taught you the law first, and then I paved the way. Yeah, that's why you got it. That became easy. Okay. Amar le Resh Lakish, ilav de kalsa gabra rabba lahava amina lach ana. Resh Lakish, who's the colleague of Rabbi Yochanan, says, if not that a great man, that's Rabbi Anai, their teacher, praised you, I would say the following. So Rabbi Yochanan is getting attacked twice for his statement. He thought he was saying something brilliant. Look, it's in the Mishnah. But now, Resh Lakish is also attacking him and said, Matnitin Rabbi Akiva hi damar en kiddushin tofsin bechayabe lavin. You can't bring a proof from this Mishnah. This Mishnah is only the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. He's the one that says that what you have an isur lav, kiddushin does not take effect. And the Yevamah, Shomedet Yavam, who is she's awaiting kiddushin, awaiting chalitza or yibum, and she goes and does kiddushin with another guy. It doesn't take effect. That's only because this Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva, but there's no proof that is the halacha. So yes, it's appropriate that we had to vote about it. So Rabbi Akiva, he says, Rabbi Yochanan, don't you realize that? Right? This is no proof at all. So Gemara here is going to try to defend the Rabbi Yochanan and says, no, it actually can't be Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, ki amar la lachash shechalos lich yevimich litpesi ba kiddushe tahashaminan le Rabbi Akiva damar adam makneh davar shelo ba la'olam. If it was Rabbi Akiva, then in the case where he says that to her, after you do chalitza, then you'll be my wife. So let kiddushin take effect in that case, even according to Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva in general says that a person can transfer something, make a legal transaction, a financial transaction, even of something that didn't yet come into the world, does not yet in existence, right? Can I sell you, a condo in a building that hasn't been built yet? All right, this is a problematic thing. So there's different opinions about this. Big machloket throughout Shas, and here Rabbi Akiva says, yes, you can. You can acquire something even though it doesn't exist in the world, and therefore we could apply that here, where he says, after chalitza, then you'll be a free woman, and so I acquire you then. So right now, even though right now she's not available and cannot do kiddushin, and that's true. Rabbi Akiva says kiddushin will not work at this point, not eligible. Nevertheless, Rabbi Akiva would say that in all of these cases, even though an eligible woman does not exist now, but will exist in the future, I can acquire her from now. And therefore, according to Rabbi Akiva, in all these cases, kiddushin should take effect. So, but the Mishnah says it does not take effect. So therefore, the not Rabbi Akiva, that supports Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, now lastly, we're just going to see, where do we ever see that Rabbi Akiva says that you can acquire something that did not yet come into existence? Here, what the Mishnah says, Kunam shani oseh lepicha en tzarich lehafer. Tanna Kama says, if a wife comes to a husband and says, my earnings, usually a wife's earnings go to her husband, and in exchange, he pays all the bills. If she says, my earnings are prohibited to you, to your mouth, you cannot eat them, you cannot have them, now that is invalid, is an invalid vow. The husband doesn't even have to nullify it. Generally, the husband has the power to nullify his wife's because it can have an effect on the marriage for sure. So we need for shalom bayit. In this case, since it's built into the requirements of the ketubah that he pays for her sustenance, and in turn he gets her earnings, so this vow is nullified from the outset. That's the Tanna Kama. Rabbi Akiva omer yafer shema ta'adif alav yoter min hara'oi lo. Rabbi Akiva says he should nullify this vow because she may make more than is fitting for him. In other words, there's only a certain amount, her earnings up to a given amount of $50,000. That is equivalent to what he's paying for her sustenance. So that would be an amount that her earnings have to go to her. But if she gets a raise and now she's making $100,000, that extra 50 she would get to keep under the basic requirements, even under the basic requirements of the ketubah, and therefore he in fact should undo the vow. Now, in this case, what you see is that Rabbi Akiva says you can acquire something that does not exist in the world. She didn't yet earn the money. He's talking about future earnings. So from here we prove that Rabbi Akiva thinks you can acquire something that doesn't yet exist in the world, and therefore Rabbi Akiva cannot be the author of that Mishnah, because that Mishnah says the Kiddushin does not work if you have a Tanai of the future. I acquire you eventually when you do Chalitza. Since Rabbi Akiva cannot be the author of that Mishnah, therefore that Mishnah must be the Chachamim, and so Rabbi Yochanan has a good proof from it. But now in the end we reject this, and in fact Rabbi Akiva it's not clear that he thinks that you can acquire something that is not yet come into existence, because when she says the vow, she doesn't say my next paycheck will be mine, because that's something that doesn't exist yet. Instead she says, I will make prohibited to my husband my hands, or the work of my hands. My hands, she says, are prohibited. They belong to their maker, meaning, and my husband cannot take them. If she does that, well, her hands do exist. So therefore, she can prohibit her hands, and therefore anything, whatever she's doing with her hands, sewing, then anything that her hands do will also be prohibited. And her hands do exist in the world. Maybe that's why the vow does take effect in this case, because the hands are there. And in fact, Rabbi Akiva does not think that you can acquire something in the future. And therefore, that Mishnah could be the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. And then we sustain Resh Lakish's complaint against Rabbi Yochanan. And with the common Arabic phrase that we say after a meal, if one's wife makes a nice meal, you say Salim bideki, may you have success in your hands, the hands that made these meals. And so this reminds me of this, well, kind of the opposite, that you're prohibited from the benefit of the works of my hands. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, amen ve'amen.